All right, we are going live now to do an experiment in using Blender GIS to map out some of the locations for the High Atlas Foundation project in Fadma in southern Morocco, and just waiting to see if I get any connection here because nothing's coming on the screen. But I think there we go. Okay, so what we're trying to do is there is a location that you will see if you go to the High Atlas Foundation and we look at their work and we look at clean water, and you will see that in clean water they have several program areas and they also have success stories, and one of them is Tunichi Village down here, and this is in the Sidi Fatma Valley where they rely on GIS or irrigation canals to move water from riverbed to fields for irrigation. So we want to map that out, and the way that we will go about mapping that out is we go to, of course, maps first, and I put in Sidi Fatma, which is what the website says, and it leads me here to what is called Sidi Fadma, and in Arabic Sidi Fadma. And so this is the area that we're looking at, and what we would do is, for example, we'll take the, let's take the Cascades here. This is a beautiful area where we can get nice pictures of the waterfalls there. We'll take that and we'll grab the coordinates for that. And then the first thing we'll do is we'll go over to cesium ion and we will go to Sidi Fadma, and we're going to make a new slide. And for this new slide, I'm going to enter these coordinates right there and hit find. And it takes you to a bird's eye view over there. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and I'm going to capture, maybe tilt a little bit there too so you can see the terrain. There we go. And I'm going to capture that view, and then I'm going to put in here that this is Sidi Fadma, Morocco. And the next thing I'll do is I will make sure that I have the High Atlas Foundation, the description of the project, and put that into my cesium down here. And that way, especially when I create a hyperlink for it, I can always go back and find that. Okay, so then I have, actually I'll bring that slide up, because then when we're at the High Atlas Foundation in Marrakesh over here, which is, as I believe, this building right here over there, then we can fly down to Sidi Fadma, zooming down south, and then zoom in on the valley. So that's a nice feature of cesium, that it does let you move around and see the different landscapes. So that's very, very helpful. Now that we have that, we're going to try to find this same location in Blender. So hold on a second, let me make sure my ArcGIS Pro is working okay. And the update failed. Okay, so let's forget about GIS for a second. I'm live recording. Okay, so now that we go into here, into Blender, we have the GIS plugin that we went over in class yesterday. And once again, for those of you who don't know how to get GIS in your Blender, there is a, you go to Edit, you go to Preferences, and you go to Get Extensions and click on here, Install from Disk, and you would have had to have downloaded the Blender GIS plugin, which is found, just do a search for Blender GIS and then use this one from GitHub, and then go to the code in green and then go download zip. And don't unzip it, but when you get into Blender and you do the when you do the installation, you can look for it wherever you've placed that zip file. There's a lot of different zips that I have here. So you would add Blender GIS, there it is, the zip, and install from disk. And then once it comes in, it goes into add-ons, and you can see it here. It has to be toggled on like that. And then you must make sure that you select a cache folder and that you have your API key. For some reason, my API key keeps disappearing, and that is a disturbance to me. I do not understand why. So for that, you've got to go to Open Topography and go to your account in Open Topography and request an API key, and then you have to log in with your free account. So all that has to be done so that you can then copy the API key, go back into Blender, and paste that API key into there, and then save your preferences. Again, I don't know why it disappeared, but it did. All right, so if you've got that, then you should see GIS here, and then when you go to Preferences, when you go to Web Geodata, go to Base Map, and you're choosing Google Satellite. That seems to be one of the several choices that are there, and go OK, and a map comes up, and then hit G for Go To, and then put in CD, and maybe make sure I'm spelling this right. So if we go back to the website of the High Atlas Foundation, then it says Seti Fadma. Now, is that going to show up in this? We just don't know till we try. Let's see what happens, because there's different spellings. It's an Arabic word. So let's see, and make your zoom level go up to 20 or 21, and say OK. And if it recognizes in the database, then you should have that part of the valley. And it does look like we're somewhere near there. Sort of hard to tell. So you zoom in and out and try to match. Yeah, that is it. That's the same valley. And we don't want to go as high up as this big river area here or this back here. We were looking at those cascades. If you recall, if I go back to the cesium ion, or actually go back to Google Maps, the Eureka Valley and Seven Cascades location is right up here where the river begins to bend into the city. So we want to match that with what we're seeing here, and that looks like it's this part here. So don't take too big a slice for Blender. Eventually we'll find out exactly where the High Atlas Foundation is doing its work, but this is an exercise for now. So when you've sort of gathered the place, hit E for extent and grab that extent of the map. If you do anything bigger, you end up crashing your computer. So be a little bit conservative with that, and we can build larger maps later. Now go into, if you've tilted it, go into the bird's eye view with number pad 7 to look down in top orthographic. And then you want to, of course, save your work. But then you want to go to GIS again into Web Geodata and now get the elevation, which is the digital elevation map, otherwise known as the SRTM, which is a something topographical map. And that's where you have to have that API key. So if you didn't put it in, you'll have to put it in there. We're going at 30 meters, not 90 meters. And so let's wait for it. And it's going to start to bend the landscape according to the topography with the image on top of it. So there we go. Now you can see when you bend it that, yeah, it's quite, it's got quite the topography in it now. You can really see that digital elevation all bent up. So working in the mountains is really exciting for anybody doing GIS. All right, so we have that. Again, go into top view with that, save your work, of course, and then go back to GIS, go to Web Geodata, and now do the one in the middle, the Get OpenStreetMap information. But this time, just do buildings, and make sure you get the elevation from the object, which is the satellite map that came in over here, so that the buildings don't sort of penetrate through the floor, so they actually map onto the elevation. I'm not separating objects when I do buildings because it crashes my computer, so I would not check that. And then maybe you want to bring the default height maybe to 10 meters. The level height 3 should be okay. I found that 20 meters is pretty ridiculously big for some reason. So then say OK, and what you'll start to get is a layer of buildings, and it takes a while, which is why I'm saying don't do separate objects, and why, what's it doing to me? Did it do anything? Did it put any buildings in? Oh no, why? So something went wrong. Let's try it again. So GIS, Web Geodata, get OSM, go to buildings, get elevation from objects. I'm going to keep it at 20 and see if that makes a difference. Got some error, and that's not fun when you get errors on that. No, overpass query failed. Check logs for more info. Well, for some reason we didn't get any information on buildings. Maybe there aren't any buildings for this. Let's try the street map information and get the highways. So I'm going to click on highways, and there I do separate objects, and let's see if that comes in, if any of that has been mapped. Sometimes it's just because there has been no mapping. These are remote areas, so maybe there is no data. And if there is no data, yeah, then we're not going to get any data. And we can try one more thing. We can try the waterway and see what that does. And there are waterways, so that worked. You can see those lines, but they didn't get onto the object. So let me Control Z out of that. Did I not check the elevation from object? Maybe I did not. Get OSM, elevation from object, waterway. That's probably what I did wrong. And yeah, now the waterways are actually connected to the map. Now, is there any data associated with them? Well, we click over here and we look down at the vertex groups. Then yes, there's some information. It says seasonal, seasonal, yes. And that's why you wanted to separate these. You can click on a given water. Did I not separate them? Uh-oh. Let's try that again. Let me get rid of those. Tab, Control Z out. And this is the chance where maybe I need to toggle everything. So I'm doing elevation from object. I'm also doing separate objects for the waterways. Yeah, I did not do that. There we go. Now you have separate objects. And if I click on one of the river systems, like this one that goes through the valley, and I move my cursor over to the scene collection window, then when I hit period key, it jumps to it. So here, if I click on this one, it jumps to that. This would be true if I really didn't see all the window. If I was like this and I want to know where is that river, I go here and then I hit the period key, it jumps to it. So this is called Wed Urika, which is a wadi, a valley. This one here doesn't seem to have any information. So what's curious is that where did that information about seasonality go that we had before? And maybe I need to import again to see that seasonality info because that part of the database has disappeared. So what I'm going to do then is I have a collection called Waterways from OpenStreetMap. And I think I'm going to just try it again and go GIS. We select this. GIS, Web Geodata, get OpenStreetMap, take the waterways. This time I'm not going to separate the objects. And I am going to do elevation from objects. And I get another waterways data base. This one is in the vertex groups. And yeah, here I have this information about what's seasonal and what's intermittent. So try it, you're getting your data different ways. And then you can see, like, this is a waterway tag. This has waterway river. This has Wikidata. I'm not sure why. This says stream. And this says seasonal. And this says tunnel. So I don't know what culvert tunnel, really what all this data is pertaining to, but that seems like the extent of the data that we can get on this system. All right, with that, we have some digital elevation information. And you can see where ground plane is down here at the bottom. You can sometimes go in and add a mesh and add a plane. It'll come in down at the bottom there. Let me hit the key there. And you can scale that plane up if you like, and scale it up. And you can then go to a material, make a new material. It'll let me. Seems like it's frozen. All right. And then change the color of the material maybe to a dark blue. And you'd have to see it by looking at the material tab. And then what you have is maybe you can call that sea level, that plane. Where is that plane? Let me close this down. And where did I put the plane? So that plane, I have to click on that. There's the plane. I actually put it in the wrong folder. I want it up here in the hierarchy. So there it is. And I'll call this the plane sea level. And then that, of course, if you look at the attributes over here of that item, that should be set at a location of 0 in Z, whereas this one here is much higher. And it's in meters, so the Z is 670 meters. See if I can move it down. So I'm not sure how accurate that is. That says 172 meters. That says 60. Sorry, it's not even letting me click on the river. That says 205 meters. So where the 670 really is in a map like this is hard to know with its foldings, because the river valley here suggests that it's 607 down there. And if that is the valley, and we wanted to put a car in the valley, let me save this again, then that is where you might go and search. First of all, let me turn on the filter here for this is called Blender Kit, and I want to make it free, and I want to condition file size. I want to make the maximum 1000. That's my filter, and then I'm going to search for a car, and then we've got a car here, here, and here, and maybe I can find a taxi. That's kind of cute. It's a New York City taxi. People like their sports cars. An Apocalypse police car. This low poly stylized car seems to work fairly well. So the lower poly you use, the better off you are. And so if I click on that, then that car will come in, and it should be there. I've got to move it out of the waterway, actually. I'll move it back into the collection. So now I have a low poly stylized car. Click on it and hit the period key when I move the cursor here, and it's down there at sea level, as you can see. And of course, you see it's clipping when I do that. You got to go to View, and you got to bring your clip start way down. But there's the car, and the car is down at sea level. So we had said that it should be up at about 610 or something. So let's once again go to the river. And the river is at, back to item, 607 meters. So what if we were to take the car and bring it up to 607 meters? Where did it go? Oh, I changed it in a bad way. I changed the dimensions. That's not good. So, yeah, how do we fix that? I guess we go to location and we go 607 meters. And then let's see if we, yeah, it's up in the air, but it's nowhere near where it's supposed to be. So whatever those meter things are, it ain't telling us much. Because actually those were dimensions. And that was a Z dimension. Even though you can tell I can move it up and down here, I'm not sure what it means in terms of raw dimensionality. I'm not at that level understanding how it's positioning things here. So we might have to just do this manually. Go grab that car, which is now hanging in the air there, and hit G for grab and Z and move it up, that little dot. And now it's way up, 2,000 something meters up there. And then zoom in on it. That's way up in the air. So to get it back down in the valley, GZ, bring it down, and GZ, bring it down, and then zoom in with the period key. And little by little, we're going to get it down into the valley. Get our car on the street there. Okay. Let's move it over to here and zoom in on it. Now the car is underground, and GZ, lift it up. Yes, so now we've got the car basically on the street. Rotate it in Z to face the right direction, and move it down again in Z. That's basically the car traveling maybe on one of the city streets. And so if we wanted to show, let me lock the Z here to 1,436 meters. We'll have to check later if that is what the altitude really is. But if I place the car there, I can set a keyframe at 1 by hitting I. And then if I go to about 2 seconds later, or maybe let's go 3 seconds later at 30 frames a second, keeping the Z locked, I can just move it across. But then it goes underground, so I need to unlock because the terrain is uneven. Bring it back up there, maybe bring it, change your view to the top view so you can try to grab it and put it on the street like that. And now it's floating in the air, so you have to do a lot of tweaking if you want to get it to move, and then set a keyframe. And then we have the car traveling down the road. When we hit the space bar, you can see the car driving, but it does go underground over here because the road is uneven. So that's where you'll have to go and set another keyframe to make it rise up a little bit. So let's move it up slightly and put a keyframe. It's going to look really awkward until we actually fix it. But then you can come in and you can have this car traveling through the valley. And that's one way to work on an animation of the area. So that's sort of like the first stage of working with the digital elevation map, that you can go in and zoom in like that. All right, so we have that area and we have the digital elevation map, and we can start messing with it. The other thing that we want to be able to show in this work is if we wanted to intervene and we wanted to put in an IBC tank for people washing by the river to take the gray water, then you might come here and put in IBC. Maybe it'll come up. Let's see. 9 results. I don't know why they're not showing up. Let's see. There we are. And let's see. That 9 results doesn't look like an IBC, but let's see if we do tank. And there's a water tank like that. If we do tote, sometimes things come up. But no, those are different kinds of totes. So we go IBC tote and nothing else comes up. Maybe it's because of our polygon count. Let's maximize, rise it up to 2,000 and see if that changes anything. If we type it in, otherwise no. Not seeing anything. We see a bookshelf. We see electric guitars. So IBC tote isn't changing it. So water tank. And there are other ways to get models. This is not the only repository to get models. But let's just start with a water tank. and we can change stuff later when we get other models. This was the easiest thing. So that water tank is now in here somewhere. There it is, water tank. Again, it went in the wrong folder, so let's go back up and drop it in collections there. There's the water tank, and of course it's going to be located way down under. So the car now, we know, is at 1,438 meters. So when we go to our water tank and hit period to find it, there it is on the ground. Let's see if we put that at 1,438 meters and then look for it. Well, that didn't do much, did it? So these meter things are not accurate as far as I can tell. Let's see, there it is. Bring it up, bring it up, bring it up. It's still not through the world, it's still under the world there. So bring it up higher and higher. And now it is over the world, so we're going to bring it down here by the car, bring it onto the beach over there, zoom in on it, and move it up onto the ground. All right, so there's a water tank that we brought in. Probably save this. We always want to have a solar panel in here, so let's put a solar array in there. It's again going to show up in the wrong place. Let me move that up and drop it here. And the solar array, I know I'm going to have to go at least maybe 1,500 in Z. And now let's find it by hitting Z. There it is. It's on the mountain. And then move it down into the valley and over where our beach was, where our car was. Is that where we were? There's the tank. Okay. So there we go. And bring that down in Z so that it's sitting on the ground, and it is facing south, it appears, so that's good and doesn't have any shadow. So yeah, we're getting to the point where we save. We can start populating the landscape with different assets that we can use, including cars and solar panels, maybe a windmill, something like that. So that's the basic idea for using Blender to do digital elevation maps, and then take it from there and do more and more learning in there. And in our next tutorial, we will look at how we can make the camera track a moving object like the car and stay on it. I suppose it's worth, maybe we just keep this one going and we look at it. Well, what you would do there, okay, is when you started the scene in Blender, way down at the bottom, you would have had a camera and you would have had a light. So here, somewhere, there it is, there's the camera, and the camera is down there looking at the cube, the default cube, and the light is there. We want those up in our scene now, so I'm going to select both of those, and I'm going to try to go up to 1,500. Well, there goes the light. Let me try the camera and do that to the camera. 1,500. Don't need the cube. Now zoom up there, and the camera still isn't anywhere near where it needs to be. Or actually, I can't find the image at all. Where's the... Let's go to the low poly car. And why is this not responding? Okay. So there's the car. Again, really hard to tell. So you're trying to move this camera from wherever the heck it is, and I can't find it, to up where the car is. So the best thing to do is not worry about moving the camera. Just get your cursor on the camera to click on it. The camera's somewhere there, wherever that is. But get your cursor on the car and then click on Control-Alt-0, and the camera snaps to looking at whatever you had your frame looking at. Now in this case, the car was way back here. So let's see what the camera sees by hitting 0. The camera's not looking at the car, so we'd have to turn the camera around. And maybe the thing to do is to look at it. There's the car, so go Control-Alt-0 again. And that should be showing you what the camera sees, except that the car disappeared. Now, why is that? Because our clip start is no good, or because our end is no good? Hard to tell, but when we play the animation, the car, there it comes. It was just too far away in terms of its own clipping. So that's what the camera would see, but then the car would zoom past. And as you can also tell, the car is really messed up in terms of the landscape. So when you're back on the car, you'd have to move it down onto the landscape here and insert a keyframe. And that way it starts to drive over and it looks like it's flying in the air. So go to the next keyframe. So you're really going to have to get really specific about putting the car on the landscape and changing keyframes. But the camera's not looking at the car the whole way, and that is our problem. We want the camera to look at the car. So how is that done? I'm still I've done it once or twice. Let me see if I can figure it out again. Just adding a camera. There's view, so there's align view. There's cameras, frame camera, set active object as camera. We don't want that. Viewport, play animation, view readings. I'm going to have to look this up again, and let's turn to our first line of defense, which is ChatGPT, because it seems to answer stuff better. I'm going to say a new thing and say, hey chat, in Blender 4.2, how do I align the camera to follow an object as it moves? Let's see what it tells us. Track to constraint, or the follow path constraint. And I've used the track to, basic camera tracking. Click on your camera, select it in the outliner, open constraints, go to properties, and add track to constraints. So if I'm understanding this properly, I'm on camera, and then I would go to that sensor fit, safe areas, background images, focal length, depth of field, type is perspective, that's fine. It's the lens, depth of field, camera, sensor fit, horizontal, vertical, and there's a size, safe areas, background images. So let me go back and make sure I understand what chat is saying. It's saying add track to constraint. Select the camera, open constraints on the property panel, click on the constraints tab. It's the chain icon. Okay. So the chain icon for constraints, if I select camera, well, it's not doing anything. The chain icon, eh? That's camera. All right. So I select camera. That didn't do anything. So chain constraints, viewport display. I have to ask it to explain better. Let's see. Add object constraint. Open constraints. Go to the properties panel and click on the constraints tab. Properties panel. The properties panel. Isn't this the properties panel here? So if I have item and I'm on the camera and I go to tool, options, if I go to workspace, nothing. If I go to view, I have the camera, collections, annotations. I'm still not seeing constraints. Maybe this one here. No, that's a different camera. That's not the object. This is the camera object. Depth of field, safe areas. Okay, I'm going to tell it I can't find the constraints tab. Let's see what it tells us. Challenge on the constraints tab. Here's where you should look. Select the camera. First, make sure you have your camera selected in the 3D viewport, which I do. Find the object constraints tab. Look in the properties panel on the right side of the screen. It looks like a small chain link icon. Make sure you're in object mode. I am. It's actively selected. You set the workspace to it. So there's a chain, eh? Do you see a chain? I do not see a chain. Oh, constraints. It doesn't look like chain at all here. Here it is. It's changed here. It looks like that. So add object constraint, and then you say tracking, and we probably want to do track to, and add a constraint to the active object, and then say that the target is going to be the car. Now it is targeted to it. So when we move, it follows the car. Beautiful. All right. Now, of course, here we're going to have to change our car's z-axis because it's going underground. And if you really want to get fancy about it, we would have to rotate in the y-axis and rotate in the x-axis slightly so that it's going up and down the hill, and and really work with this so that when we're now, let me do it with the x-axis to rotate, not that, r and y, and have it tilt down there, and then hit constraint. And yeah, I mean, it's funky, right? Like there, this is not the way it really looks. So you need to move that up like that and rotate it in the x-axis a little bit so that it's on the hill there, and then add that constraint. So you have to tweak it and stuff, but there it is. It's following that when we hit play, and so we'll spend more time with that. But that's the idea. So that's what we needed to do. There's that constraint object property thing here when you're clicking on the camera, and you can then change the constraint of what you want to look at. And you can change the track axis as well, but that could be pretty funky. Here, if we go back, that's the track axis, and that really is messed up because it's not that. I think it's negative z. Yeah, it's a negative z, but it's working, and it's boom. All right. Fun way to work with geographical data. Absolutely fun. Here you can see the camera, by the way, moving as it follows the car. You can see how the camera tracks it. You see. So zoom and follow. It's because it's got that constraint. And that's what we were looking at the end of class yesterday. So happy Blender GISing. I think that's the best exercise, is get a topography, put in a car, put in some sustainability technology on the landscape, set a camera in. The last thing, of course, is you got to have the light in here. And the light right now is somewhere down there. And so once again, we'd have to move that light all the way up and up and up and up. So let's see if we can make a difference that way. Let's go back to our camera and find it. There's the camera. So what about the light? The light has to be brought up into the world. And where is the light? Pretty hard to find. It's like somewhere, maybe it's way too high. So the light is not showing up. So you can't move the light as easily as you can the car. I mean, it can be moved, but it's like hard to know, like where is that? I'm gonna try 1,600 and see if that. No, it's really hard to tell. So what you often can do is just simply delete that light, go to your water tank or whatever it is that you're looking at, your solar panels, and then just add a light here. So you go add and then light, and then maybe you want to put in the sun. And where does it come in? It's way down there, but at least now you can see it relative to this. And then Z, move the sun up into the sky. And by having the sun there, now when we zoom in on the car, for example, then it's well lit. And you can have the sun actually move in the sky. Maybe you want something where the shadows, if I rotate the sun, then you're going to get some shadows the way they would naturally fall. So if the sun is coming, let me move the sun again, G, and move it back here behind the mountain, and move the way that it points over the mountain from the south. And then when we look at the car, we're supposed to see a shadow, and that would only happen in render. So let me tilt this car too. This is ridiculous. It would be R in, is it Y? No, it's R, rotate in X. Yeah, it would have to be like that. But it looks awful dark, and that may be because the sun needs to be brightened up a little bit. Maybe significantly. Let's bring it up to 100. It'll let us. That's not doing much, is it? And the color of the sun, is the sun too far away? Oh, look at that. It's really casting a shadow over there. So there's, wow, there's the sun. So that's where you have to start playing with it and moving it so that you can get the right kind of shadow fall. So that is much too bright. Let's bring it down, maybe bring it down to 20. There we go. It's not too bright now. And then we start seeing the shadows. When we look at the car, we should see, oh, it's in shadow. Now, part of this rendering issue that we're getting here is because we're looking at the render mode, and the render mode is either set to EV or it's set to cycles. So it's to cycles, it takes a lot more time to render, but it does cast better shadows, as you can kind of see here. There's the shadow of the car. And that can be helpful because we know the car is way too high. The car should sit on the landscape, casting a shadow there. But, you know, that is a, cycles takes a long time. If we do workbench, we don't see any rendering at all. And if we do EV, then we see the rendering, but we also get some weird artifacts. You can take the sun and you can go to the light and tell it, well, I don't want it to be a sun, I want it to be a spotlight, or I want it to be a point light. Sometimes those work better, but they need to be made a lot brighter. And you have to be more specific about where that light source is. If you bring it down and bring it over with a light source, you're going to have to play around with it. And then decide if it's, if I do a spotlight, how far it's supposed to go in terms of its lighting ability. You can have an area light, you can have a spotlight. The sun is the one that most people will use for the sun, and it defaults to 10. Maybe we should just keep it at 10 and let it be that, and then look at our car. But because it's in the valley, it's still giving a weird artifact. So you'll have to start playing around with objects and playing around with their brightness and color temperature. Point lights can be, let's see if I do 500 watts. Doesn't seem to do a darn thing. If I do 1,000 watts, a lot of energy, doesn't do a darn thing because it's so high up. If we bring this down, I don't know, oh, it's already cached. So I want to change the radius of it. Of course, we do want the shadow, the influence. There's so much to play with here. Change the color temperature of the light a little bit. But yeah, playing around so that you can get it. And these are big landscapes, so that's why it's, see if that's the sun when it's more yellowish. That's the sun when it's more whitish. And then we increase the intensity. But we are getting these weird artifacts. Those artifacts should not show up when we go to the, if we go to the camera view and we, let's see if we look at what the camera's seeing. Now if we go here and we actually do a render of that image, it shouldn't, oh, it did do the artifact. Okay, well, I'm not sure why it's giving us that weird artifact. And I can't account for it. Let me see if I increase this to 500 watts and I do a render, does it make a difference? You always have some problem or another in Blender. It's not very bright, okay, with that render. But, you know, there it is. And radius I can make maybe 100 meters. I'm still not seeing anything happening in terms of the light. So that's something we'll have to play with and work out, because the valley seems awful dark. Some people put lights in their scene all over the place. So for example, if I keep moving my light down and move my light, where's my light? There it is. And move it over to the car and then come down like this and change the power. Does that give us anything? Not really. If I change it to sunlight, so I've never seen it do this. Oops, I need to grab that. I've never seen it do this kind of weird artifacting before. It seems very unusual, and maybe it's some processing error that will change when I reload the file, because it's only working on one side of the mesh. The others seem to be okay. So yeah, I can drive you batty, but that's what's going on there. I don't know. Tool, view, transform, properties, clip length. Clip length has something to do with it, maybe. That's interesting. So I always have to play around with stuff when you're doing final rendering. But yeah, I don't know. It's not really something I can influence. The shadow is the problem. Look at that. So the shadow is creating the problem. Now, if I go to the camera view and I bring my strength down just a bit, I should get a decent render from that. Yep. So it was the shadow that was causing complications. All right. All right. So that's it for this then. We've got a interesting start, and we'll go on to something else later on.